You're watching The Press Row, and we're debating the wisdom of leaving college early. I'm Mike Sherman, here with columnists Jenny Carlson, John Rohde, and Barry Trammell. We sit here on the eve of the NFL draft, guys, and we ponder an intriguing local what if. What if OU quarterback Sam Bradford had entered the NFL draft earlier, this NFL draft? Would he have been taken ahead of Mark Sanchez? Would he have been taken ahead of Matthew Stafford? What would have happened, Barry?
Well, I don't think there's any way of knowing because those guys undergo intense evaluation after they declare. I assume Stafford probably would have been taken ahead of Bradford. That seemed to be what most people said would have happened. But it would have been interesting. I think Sam would have had a chance to be number one because he's got strengths that Stafford doesn't and vice versa. So I think we maybe have to wait till next April to see if Sam made the right economic decision.
How about it, Jenny?
Well, I don't think he made a bad economic decision. I think he's still going to be a pretty high draft pick. I think there was some debate of whether it was Stafford or Bradford, but I just don't hear a lot of people that are drafting high feeling really, really positive about drafting Matthew Stafford. When you draft a quarterback really high in the draft, you have to know that they're going to do something pretty good. And I think there's still a lot of question about these guys that are at the top of this quarterback draft. So I don't know. For Sam Bradford, he may just be the clear cut next year, John. I think he made a good decision by coming back.
Well, he could have been first, could have been third. Who knows? Could have been fourth. It depends on immediate need. You know, he's a year younger. Well, he's redshirt sophomore, but he's a young guy. But here's the thing with Sam Bradford. The more you get to see him, the more you get to know him, the more you're impressed with him. Maybe the same would have been with the NFL people. Don't know.
John, you wrote about that in a column that was just not really related at all to Sam Bradford today, but just sort of how the intangibles of Sam Bradford bubble up at every contact. And isn't that what this sort of intense scrutiny, interviewing, research into these guys is all about? They know what kind of throws they can make. They get that at the combine. They get that on film. Now, what's been uncovered in the last couple of weeks are a lot of character questions. That's where I think Sam, against these guys, I think he holds his own, Barry.
Well, I do too. No, I don't know anything bad to say about Sanchez or Stafford. I mean, I think they're probably high-quality guys themselves. You don't see a lot of high-quality guys who persevere throughout a college career and end up leading a big-time team. We saw a character issue, sort of take Rhett Bomar down. So, I think Sam would have stood tall with those guys, but I think those guys are probably pretty solid too.
I think the only thing that Sam was, to me, it comes down to, does he stay healthy? Does he go into next year's draft as healthy as he was, it would have been heading into this year's draft? And it's impossible to know that. He's going to have a much more inexperienced offensive line, so you have to believe he's going to get hit more than he did last year. That, to me, would be the one big concern. Going back, the money, I think, is going to be largely the same. The question is, how healthy are you? Are there questions about an arm that got hit or an ankle that got tweaked? I think that would be the biggest concern for Sam Bradford.
Oddly enough, that'll answer another question. How's he do under pressure? He'll be under more pressure this year.
That's right, and that is a question that you heard early on, just sort of, he's under the shotgun a lot, especially once his hand got messed up, and you thought, well, can he stand the pressure? And the thought was that Matthew Stafford, because maybe Georgia's line wasn't as good the last couple of years, could hold up better. That's an odd way of looking at it, but maybe so. Okay, well, if Bradford does come out next year, which I guess there's still a possibility, he could keep going and go on the Jason White plan and stay another year. But he would be one of 4 OU players who project as a first-round pick. That would create the possibility that next year's Sooner class is one of the best draft classes ever. Then up the road, you got OSU with its potential first-rounder in Dez Bryant.
Russell Okung.
And Russell Okung. So there's 5. We're talking Williams. Trent, we're talking one of the best. We're talking one of the best draft classes ever, maybe for the state. Now there's this year, which really doesn't have a lot of sizzle past Brandon Pettigrew. We have 3 local seniors who are on teams' draft boards for this NFL draft. They're up there high. Let's talk about them, and would they have been better off if they would have gone out a year early, left as juniors? Let's start with Duke Robinson. How about him, John?
Well, I'm not smart enough to know the depth of the line last year's draft, but I don't see how it could hurt guys to stick around and get to the national title game and show what you can do and set records, offensive records, and be part of that kind of group. I would think that draw more attention to Duke Robinson and Phil Lodeholt. Phil Lodeholt's last game, Barry, after a junior year, he got embarrassed down at the Fiesta Bowl. So I thought he made a wise choice coming back.
Yeah, I did too. I do think Duke Robinson's stock a year ago seemed to be higher than it is today. I mean,
Is that the position, or is that?
I don't know. Well, I mean, as you know, 3 or 4 months ago, we thought Duke Robinson's going to be a first-round pick, but now there's talk he may drop, third round or so. So he's the guy I might look at. The problem with the NFL is the longer they evaluate you, the less they like you. They find more things they dislike than things they do like, and you tend to fall. Which is one reason why both NBA and NFL the last 10 years, the younger players have crept up and up and up and up more in the draft because they've been evaluated less time. They're more of a raw mineral that teams think they can sort of mold. So Duke's a guy that might have hurt himself.
Yeah, and you know what? Duke's an interesting guy because he told me at one point this year that he really only started playing football sort of late in his high school career. So he is still a relatively young football player. He's not a guy that, as a third grader was bigger than everybody else and has been playing football and getting beat around for all these years. He's still a guy that is, you could potentially say, he could still grow as a player and get better. And that has to be intriguing with his size and the ability that he has. And yeah, I don't know why he dropped because to me he seems like a guy that, had as good or better a season. I agree with John though on Loadholt. It was like he had to come back after West Virginia. But Robinson probably did drop a little bit by coming back.
You raised the question whether it's the position. I think offensive guards, you do not see a lot of teams draft guards high, although in the last couple drafts, I know Baltimore took a guard high. There's been a couple other teams that did that. If they're power running teams, Pittsburgh Steelers, you see some mention that Duke Robinson could go there. Now, the story of the draft locally, of course, is OSU tight end Brandon Pettigrew, who looks like a cinch at the last half of the first round. However, the Atlanta Falcons, one of the teams that we thought would really be interested in him, yesterday went out and traded for Tony Gonzalez. So there's another, you can cross them off, Philadelphia, Baltimore. But the question is, would Pettigrew have been better off if he had left early? Because as a junior, we remember, how many Superman pictures did we run on the front page of the Oklahoman? Him diving, making incredible game-winning plays. He gets hurt. He has an off-the-field incident. They don't use him as much. Texas comes to mind. Would Brandon Pettigrew have been better off if he had left early, Barry?
Well, possibly. You never know. I think he's still, tight end's another place where very rarely do they go top 10, top 15. Tight end's usually a place where you go in the teens or the 20s. And that really doesn't change much year to year. I think Pettigrew probably didn't hurt himself much, if at all. And you mentioned the off-the-field incident. That actually, probably plays a factor. But I think Pettigrew's still going to go first round. And if not, I don't think he lasts past Kansas City, which is second or third in the second round. So he's going to go in the top 35 picks. It's just whether he nudges into the first round or not.
It's probably a push on him, whether it was good or bad to go or come back. I think that the things that teams like, it's such a niche. You're talking about you got to have the need for a guy to play that tight end position. Is he great catching the ball? Yes. Is he great blocking? Yeah, he probably is better at that than he is catching it. So those things were in place last year just like they are this year. I think it's kind of a push, John, whether it was a good or bad idea to if you want the extra year of money, well, then it was a bad idea.
Well, this is more about the position guys than the person. And Brandon Pettigrew, they clump him in like groups of 3 or 4 guys unless somebody's a freak. Now, Jermaine Gresham next year could be a freak followed by 3 or 4 tight ends. But Barry's right. It's the position. They're rarely taken early. And so really, I agree with Jenny. It's a push. Pettigrew didn't hurt himself.
Okay, guys, let's go on to the NBA and its looming draft, and yet another what if. What if Blake Griffin had entered last year's NBA draft? Would he have been better off? And would the Oklahoma City Thunder been better off? Jenny, start with you.
Well, those are 2 big different questions,
We'll
I
take
think.
Blake first.
Okay, I think monetarily he's better off to have stayed. I think he's now clearly the number 1 pick. Last year, maybe he's a number 1 to 2, but he might fall out of that spot, and that's a lucrative position. Would he have seen the type of improvement he saw at OU? You can debate that. I think that's a question that we'll never know because he improved a whole heck of a lot the way he went. So would he have improved that much if he'd have had a summer of working out the same way and then going and playing for a team in the NBA, it's hard to tell. I mean, he improved a whole heck of a lot the way he went. So it's sort of hard to argue with that.
Well, we're here to argue about that and debate that.
Well, I don't know how you could improve any more than Blake Griffin improved.
How about it, Barry?
Well, I think Blake made the right decision, but it had nothing to do with basketball. Well, had nothing to do with economics Blake wanted to play with his brother. He wanted to have another year on the college campus with his parents 20 miles down the road and come and watch him, and he wanted a chance to lead OU to the Final Four and fell just short of that. But, you can't put a price tag on that, so you can't say he made the wrong decision. Economically, if he'd come out last year, he wouldn't make as much money. We talked about this. His contract for the first 4 or 5 years would have been less, but he would have got to the big money sooner. So, I don't think that it was necessarily a financial decision, a wise financial decision. But to me, there's no doubt that Blake Griffin would have made the same improvement in the NBA. He'd have made more improvement. You get better playing against good people. And you get better playing all day, every day, rather than, whenever the NCAA says you can practice. So Blake Griffin that we see today would be that and more if he had a year under his belt in the NBA. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
See, this is where I think you're flawed, because we know how much he improved at OU, and we know how big a jump that was. If he had gone to the NBA, and you might be right, but if he had gone to the NBA, what about confidence? What about injury? What about wear and tear? What about frustration? What about how would he have handled a 3-29 start if he were starting or part of it? You don't know how he would have reacted to that. We do know how he reacted his sophomore year at OU. That is a given. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but you dismiss the chance that he couldn't possibly be any worse. And I think he could have been, just from, like she said, lack of playing time and lack of confidence and wear and tear. And he would have been 19 in the NBA, too.
He was going to be the man at OU regardless.
My goodness, how can you argue with the results as a sophomore?
Well, you really can't. That's right.
You can't. On the other hand, when you talk about confidence, we're not talking about somebody that's lacking in confidence. The psyche and the mental part of Blake Griffin has never been an issue.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. He's not a Kansas City Royals pitcher.
No. And here's the other thing. He would play more. Blake Griffin, no matter where he went or who he went to, would have gotten a lot more court time in the NBA than in college, because you're playing 82 games and not 35. And, if you play 20 minutes a game in the NBA, you're getting more. And all of that is against people that are really good. Blake Griffin had about 10 games this year when he was challenged. He'd have 82 in the NBA when he was challenged. Blake improved a bunch, but I think we're going to see him improve even more this time next year.
We know that Blake Griffin wasn't motivated by the money. He was motivated, as you guys have said, playing with his brother, elevating OU, trying to get to the Final Four, and enjoying college experience. But the money thing is interesting, because we assume, he comes out in a better financial position. When you do the numbers, not that much. Let's just say he would have been taken fourth by the Thunder, which I think there's no doubt about that, given the Thunder's interest in him now. That's $2.9 million he would have made this year that he did make playing at OU. So $3 million. The difference, if you take these contracts out to their 5-year full length, $27 million is what he'll make if he's taken number one in June and then stays on the schedule that the NBA maps out for its rookies. $27 million. If he would have come out last year, he would have made $20 million. But he would have got $3 million ahead, and he would have gotten into the big money sooner. And that big money, those options that kick in year 4, year 5, you get to double your money there, not just these 26 and 30% increases as prescribed. So the money standpoint, to me, everybody says, he's going to come out in a better position. I don't buy it.
$7 million better, though. That's $7 million. That's pretty big to me.
$7 million if you don't get to year 5 and they love you and they do what they did for Chris Paul in New Orleans, which was says we're going to take you from $5 million to $17 million.
That could happen now. As a number 1 pick, he could get the big money in
just sooner. He would just get there sooner.
Yeah, but he's still going to get there. And I think, too, being a number 1 draft pick, that carries some cool factor. There's going to be sponsors that are going to come get him. Russell Westbrook hasn't seen that yet. Kevin Durant saw that immediately as the number 2 with the yin-yang of Greg Oden. I think Blake Griffin is a guy that you'll see some sponsorship dollars too as the number 1 pick. So add that in, and that takes you to a whole other level financially.
Let's talk about the Thunder, which there seems to be no doubt in my mind that the Thunder would have been better off had he come out. Isn't it plausible, almost likely, that they would have taken him at number 4, John?
Yeah, I think they've said that behind closed doors too, but we wouldn't have seen Russell Westbrook. So there's good and bad. I think they would. I don't know if they would have been better off, Barry. I mean, I know they're loaded at guard, and you mentioned how Watson would have played more, and they could have, stopped that gap there. But they also wouldn't have a guy on the verge or with the potential, with the athleticism of Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, it's just a replacement.
Moving parts.
And you're looking for a point guard in this draft instead of some interior help, and hoping for the number 1 pick so you can get Rubio the way they're now hoping for the number 1 pick so they can get Blake. But they would have the local boy making good and be more marketable than Russell Westbrook, and he'd be a lot better quote than Russell Westbrook. So I mean, there's a lot of reasons to want Blake Griffin in town.
Also, they wouldn't have to be thinking about the possibility of trading Russell Westbrook for the privilege of getting Blake Griffin or trading Jeff Green. So it's an interesting what if. Here's another one though. What if Courtney Parrish had left early? You laugh, Jenny.
There's some left field questions in this press
How
row, by
left?
the way.
So Kansas City Royals were mentioned too. So.
How about
That's
it?
left.
Wouldn't she have been better off as a professional player? Wasn't her stock trading higher last year?
Yeah, but Candace Parker came out, so she still wouldn't have been the top pick in the draft. Nobody was going to be higher than Candace Parker. If you're talking about when was her stock highest, you might want to look back at her freshman or sophomore year. After those years and coming out then, I don't. You know what? She might not have improved her stock that much if she would have come out early. She got drafted. Was it 7th or 9th? I forget. 7th. I mean, I still think she was drafted in about the range that most people thought she'd be drafted. And if she was really trying to ride the stock being high, she probably would have had to leave after year 1 or 2 almost.
Well, obviously everybody knows you can't. In the WNBA, you can't leave early. You can't leave before you graduate. You can't leave before you're 21.
Candace Parker could do it because she had
ACL.
that
got
injury.
hurt that injury, and she graduated. But most importantly, by the way, she wouldn't have gone 7th last year. I think she did hurt herself staying another year. But if she leaves early, we don't get Bubba Parrish.
Well, that's true. And here's the other thing. The difference between being picked 2nd in the draft and 7th in the draft is virtually nothing.
Financially, nothing.
Doesn't mean anything.
Prestige.
So she obviously made the right choice. There's no reason to go early in the WNBA draft because it's not it's just not the status is still in college, unlike these other sports we've been talking about.
Well, I'm hearing interesting things coming out of Sacramento too. A sports editor, a friend of mine who works out there in that market, says they're pretty excited about getting Courtney out there, what she'll do, and then that pulls in people from the Northern California market. They're close enough to the Bay Area that they get some interest
her
there.
family.
Near her family.
Hey,
they're thrilled
They're going to
about
love
her.
Courtney. I mean, we may not have written about this enough with Courtney in Oklahoma. Courtney really connected with the fans of Oklahoma. I mean, they really. It goes far beyond points and rebounds on that deal. I mean, there was a relationship there. They really felt like she was one of their own. She'll do wonders PR-wise for Sacramento. Should be a great get for anybody, any franchise, but she'll really do great for Sacramento.
Well, she's a player that they were still keeping up with. I mean, as a local, being from Piedmont, which is, sort of that neck of the woods, very much that neck of the woods, there were still stories about her and still, people were still keeping up with her. So the fact that she's going to Sacramento, I mean, that's as close as you can get for her home area. So I think people are really stoked. I had a chance to, I was trolling around the internet for some other stuff and ran across some people Sacramento fans talking about her coming. Yeah, they're way excited about Courtney Parrish.
Side shoot to that real quick, conspiracy theory, and WNBA is in trouble by the other teams not picking Courtney and allowing Sacramento to get a hometown girl there. Strengthens the league, strengthens the franchise, gets attendance up in that area. That's been said.
Interesting. Also, because Sacramento needs all the energy flow into that because they need a new arena. The WNBA team can't hurt there.
Like Barry said, financially it's a push, so it doesn't really hurt anybody. Yeah.
Okay, finally, enough talk about what other people should do. As we sit here at the table of truth, a show of hands, which of us here actually did jump to the pros early? Barry.
I jumped. I was 18. I'll leave it to other people to determine whether I was Moses Malone or Bill Willoughby, but I jumped I quit school after 6 hours in the summer of '79 and went to work full time at the Norman Transcript. So
6 actual hours or 6 hours of class?
6 hours of class.
Oh,
6
okay.
hours of yeah. Yeah.
I was like, did you
I
just
took
go to
2
class
summer
for 6
school
hours?
classes,
Okay.
so it worked out for me. A lot of hard work and a lot of years put in to make up for it. I'm not saying I made the best direction.
And you got your degree.
I went back and got my degree, which puts me in line with. I know Vince Carter did it. Vince Carter. He's the one that comes to mind. So
Kevin Durant's going to school, right?
yeah, Kevin Durant's going to take a while. Boy, I heard Kevin talking about that the other day. It's going to
Got a
take him
long way.
forever.
It's like 2 more summers before he's a sophomore, I think.
Jenny, did you jump?
Sort of. Was still going to school, but I was getting some pay on the side for some work. So I don't know if that makes me like I did something illegal or not.
No, it's same as her, 2-sport kind of thing.
You were John Elway.
That's right. I refused to work for the Baltimore Sun. I demanded to be traded to the Denver Post. So,
And me, I jumped early. I had 6 hours left to go. I might be James on Curry or somebody like that. I don't think but I jumped early. I applaud anybody else's efforts to go out there and make money in the American capitalist system. That's all for Press Row, but you can stay with the best coverage teams anywhere, every day at News OK and every morning in the Oklahoman.
Let's see it.